Hi everybody, quite excited to get behind the wheel of the highly anticipated second generation Subaru BRZ. This is the car that Subaru builds with Toyota, so they have the GR86 and this BR80Z, and a lot of work has gone into this second generation car. After all, it is 9 years in the making. The first generation BRZ was a 2013 model year, and this second generation car is a 2022 model year. Now, considering how much time passed between Gen 1 and Gen 2, it's also kind of a surprise that not much change, not many updates happened to the first generation car over the years. It had little tweaks here and there, but it was largely the same. So considering all that, you'd expect a huge difference in the second generation car. But thank God that is not the case. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some significant differences between this and the first generation BRZ, but the fundamentals of what makes this a good sports car remain. Subaru and Toyota spent time fixing what needed to be fixed and not messing with the other stuff. So what did change between the first and second generation? Well, displacement changed in the engine. You go from a 2-liter flat 4 to a 2.4-liter flat 4, and there are some big differences there. And the chassis is 50% stiffer torsionally. That is a big bump in chassis stiffness, and that allowed them to do some more tuning and some improved tuning with the suspension and those kinds of things. What didn't change? The car is still really small, the car is still really light, and the car is still naturally aspirated. All very important things to make like a nice, simple, pure sports car. I'm going to get into more detail on those various things. But first, we should talk about trims. There are two trims of Subaru BRZ, the Premium and the Limited. And while they both sound like higher end trims, the Premium is the base model, the Limited the higher end model. There is a $2,500 difference between the two, and what you get for that $2,500 is stuff like 18-inch wheels instead of 17s, and also higher end rubber on those 18-inch wheels. You get leather seating, you get fancier headlights, you get heated front seats, you get nicer stereo, those types of things. I'll put a list of some of it on the screen right now so you can get a sense of it, but that's what $2,500 will get you. The only other big difference in price is going with the base manual transmission or the $1,600 optional automatic transmission. Sadly, this has the $1,600 automatic transmission. Of all the cars to get an automatic in, this is definitely not the one to do it. But hey, not everyone can drive stick, and yes, there are even some driving enthusiasts that cannot drive stick. But because this is the base car, but with the optional automatic transmission, its price is $30,555. Really not bad for something that is truly a proper sports car, especially in this day and age. And the price does go up a little bit from there, but that is the price. I have no options or anything like that. So with that, why don't I take a moment to get out and show you around and inside the car. All right, everybody, let's take a closer look at this 2022 Subaru BRZ. Overall, you can tell that this is an evolutionary, not revolutionary design. The main traits of this car hold true to the first generation, and that is a good thing because it looks like a proper light sports car. Now, this particular one is painted in ice silver metallic. A couple of nice details to point out though: the hood, front fenders, and roof are made of aluminum, and that does two things. It helps keep the weight down, of course, but it also, especially on the roof, helps keep the center of gravity low, and that is a nice thing. Also, if you look closely at the roof, you'll notice that there's this kind of like crease there and farther over there. Subaru included what they call a double bubble roof, kind of a nod to vintage race cars of old to give just a little bit more space for helmeted heads. And if you look inside, you can see the bubbles there as well. Looking at the car for the front, again, the same styling cues of the original model certainly show up, but you know, I do like what they've done here. I like this work down here by the lower vents. I like this lower front lip spoiler right here, and I think this black works well and blends in with the silver really nicely. Also, I'll take a moment to pop the hood and show you that we also have a front strut tower brace going across right there. Looking at the car in profile, definitely the classic two-door sports car shape. Let me first quickly put the dimensions of the BRZ up on the screen for you to see. The car has grown about an inch. It's about an inch longer, but it's actually also a little bit lower to the ground, half an inch lower to the ground. So it's a tiny bit bigger, tiny bit lower, and it does weigh a little bit more, but really not by much. This is still well under 3,000 pounds, this car. That is a very good thing. And there are a couple of details that I really like about this body. First of all, these side vents here are functional. You can see the passageways right here, and that allows air from the front fender to have a release, so you don't have a high pressure zone building up right here. And then from this fender, this kind of follows down. You've got this like nice lower rocker that comes out and gets a little bolder and then kind of escapes into the body here to give you this nice swoopy shape, which looks really cool. Kind of gives you like a Formula car side pod kind of look, which is really nice. Also, when you look in back, you've got this tiny little body outskirt right here that flares out from the rear wheel well. That actually is functional. That helps with aero. That does add just a little bit of functional aero to have the air flow over the car the way the engineers intended, as do these tiny little bits right here. These are just help channel the air and help reduce vortices coming off the back. So these look really subtle. It's not like you're getting thousands of pounds of downforce from these or anything like that, but it does help direct air and reduce drag. So those do serve a purpose. Because we have a premium, not a limited, we have 17-inch wheels and tires. They fill up the wheel wells just fine. That's not an issue, though the 18-inch wheels do get stickier rubber. They are Michelin Pilot 4 high-performance tires, where these are Michelin Primacies, not as high grip, dry road friendly, but you know, still a good tire. Looking at the car in back, as I said about the rest of the car, you know, same basic design stands out here. I think they did a good job. I think that this spoiler is nice and subtle enough. It's not too ostentatious and in your face, just kind of like a nice little subtle duckbill to it. And I do very much like these dual exhaust tips right there and right there to let that 2.4 liter flat four sing. All right, let's take a look inside the car. Yes, you do have a trunk. It's small. You've got something like 6 cubic feet of space in the trunk. Yeah, whatever. But these rear seats, as you can see, those straps there and there, the rear seats do fold down. So if you need more space, you can access it that way. All right, let's go to the front. Okay, super quickly. Yes, this is a 2+2. You do have back seats. No, I'm not getting back there. Look how small it is back there. Look how tight the legroom is. I'm not getting back there. Yes, you can legally fit people back there if you want. I do not want, so I'm not gonna. This is a black interior, of course, but I do really like this red stitching that you'll see throughout the upholstery. I think that's really nice. You do have auto up and down for your power windows. Power locks as well, side view mirror adjustment, bottle holder, lovely. You do get aluminum pedals down there, and yes, you're right, there are only 2 and a dead pedal. I know, but you also get a trunk release right there. You can adjust the light for the instrument cluster right there. You do have tilt and telescope steering adjustment. The flap is down there, you pull it down and adjust it that way. It is manually adjusted. Now, let's get to some more good news. Look at the deep upper and lower bolsters in these seats, and look at the material. These are cloth, deeply bolstered seats. Cloth is just better for when you want to go to a track day and that kind of stuff, worry about scuffing leather and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to. This is cloth, it's simple, it's easy, it's lightweight. This is a manually adjusting seat that's also lightweight. Push button start is down here. That is a fully digital instrument cluster right there with a tachometer in the center. It is a 7-inch screen, so fully digital, but also quite small. So you have a big tachometer in the center, miles per hour is nestled in between there, and then you have some other important things to know on either side. Getting ahead of myself, but there's this track button down here. Press that, good firm, you have to hold it down for a second. It turns off stability control and switches the tachometer to this linear setup right here with speedometer below that. Yes, this is an automatic, but it is also a leather wrapped steering wheel, and it has that nice red stitching right there. And we do have paddle shifters, upshift, downshift right there. Here are some of your adjustments for your adaptive cruise control. There's the cruise control right there. So I said you can adjust things on this digital instrument cluster, right? Well, it's on this side over here, and you use this toggle right here. So if I play with that, you can see I can do information, and if I go up or down, that shows me voltage and oil pressure, but then I can also switch it to fuel economy, trip stuff, and tire pressures. Or I can go over here and get different graphs for speed, torque, and power. That's nice to have that little map. Lap times, and also a G meter. And you can see down there that I'm pressing my foot lightly on the brake. I'll press harder on the brake, and I'll give it some gas. So there's a little something. Over here, the larger of two screens is your 8-inch center console touchscreen right here. It has a lot of the usual features you'd expect. You do have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. It is wired. Below that, you do have dual zone climate control right there. Here is your pretty standard looking Prindle. It does kind of quasi look like a stick shift. That's a little bit devious, but whatever. Now, beneath that, that's where things get a little bit more fun. This is your traction control and stability control on off. And here are your 3 drive modes. You have normal, sport, and snow. We'll keep it in sport for the most part. Also, you can have just traction control off or traction and stability control off. One press turns off traction control. Press and hold it down, and you turn off traction and stability control. Or, like I showed you before, if you put it in track mode, that also turns off stability control. Okay, looking farther down, you get a cup holder. Press this, you get 2 more cup holders, and here are your places to plug in a couple of USB ports and an auxiliary port right there. So anyway, clearly this is a purposeful car meant for driving and driving enthusiasts, so let's definitely get back to the drive. All right, let's dig into that powertrain. 228 horsepower at 7,000 RPM, 184 pound-feet of torque at 3,700 RPM from a 2.4 liter flat 4 horizontally opposed pistons 4-cylinder engine. As I've said before, it is a naturally aspirated engine, not turbocharged. You get a 12.5-to-1 compression ratio, and you do also get dual overhead cams and 4 valves per cylinder and all that lovely stuff. One thing that is not unique but less common is you do have a dual injection system. So that means you have both port and direct fuel injection in this car, and it's pretty easy to understand why. You get to use the advantages of port injection and the advantages of direct injection and combine the two how you wish. This 2.4 liter replaces an also naturally aspirated 2 liter flat 4 that was in the first generation BRZ, and with that increased displacement, you do get increased horsepower and torque. You get 23 more horsepower in a manual transmission equipped BRZ and 27 more horsepower in an automatic transmission equipped BRZ, because the last generation BRZ had a 5 horsepower difference between the manual and the automatic. The second generation is the same horsepower and torque across the board, and that of course is true for the first generation versus now torque peaks as well. You get a 28 pound-feet of torque improvement from the manual transmission first generation and a 33 pound-feet of torque improvement from the automatic, but the amount of torque you get, the added torque, is not the critical component. It's when you get that torque. So the torque peak in the first generation car was 6,400 RPM. Really close to the red line. So it was an extremely peaky engine, and the progression of power buildup wasn't that linear either. This engine, on the other hand, peak torque comes at 3,700 RPM, which is much more reasonable, much more stout, and gives you a much more linear power buildup over time. So it's more torque that comes 2,700 RPM earlier and builds more linearly. It is a huge, huge improvement to the outgoing engine, and it only took a little bit of displacement. Now, peak horsepower comes at 7,000 RPM, and your red line is more like 7,500 RPM, so this engine definitely does wind up and wind out. Yeah, that is a very, very nice improvement over the outgoing model. As I mentioned, this does have the $1,600 optional 6-speed automatic transmission, no clutch. It is a shame, and it is a shame for a lot of reasons. One, this is such a great sports car fundamentally, yet it's missing a critical component, a critical part of engagement with the car. It's $1,600 more, so it's more expensive. It's heavier. In the premium car, it adds 49 pounds to the weight. And the gear ratios aren't even the same. They're a little bit taller. So you don't get to go through the gears as quickly as you might like, and you don't get to really maximize this added power that you might do, especially if you find yourself on a bunch of tight, twisty corners. Now, it's far from bad. It's still good gearing, but for a lot of reasons, the automatic is not as good as the manual in the BRZ. But regardless of transmission, you do have rear-wheel drive, of course, and that rear-wheel drive standard comes with a Torsen limited slip differential, so power delivery to those rear wheels are really, really good. And again, I'm going to say it a lot, proper sports car. Now, there is one advantage to having an automatic transmission. You do get better fuel economy in the automatically equipped BRZ. 21 miles to the gallon in the city, 30 miles to the gallon on the highway, 25 combined. That compares pretty favorably to the 20 miles to the gallon in the city, 27 miles to the gallon on the highway, 22 combined for the manual BRZ. But again, a car like this is to have fun in, and the automatic hurts when it comes to acceleration. But it's still not bad. Let me show you. All right, everybody, time for an acceleration test. This one's a bit of a bummer. It's definitely good to have much more horsepower and torque and a much lower torque peak, but I would much rather be shifting on my own. Anyway, I've come to a complete stop. Bit of brake torque. Oh, before the brake torque, I am in track mode and I am in sport mode as well, and that means the stability control is off. All right, bit of brake torque. Oh, we're getting some wheel spin. That was fun. Okay, I'll admit that was fun. And we've got pretty darn decent hustle here. Wow. Wow. Nice high revs from the flat 4 engine. Good pep, good hustle, and credit where credit's due. This is an automatic, but this is a sportly tuned automatic. The fact that you could start roasting the tires while brake torquing, all right, that's an incentive. Okay. Credit to this automatic. It is tuned properly. Yeah, I mean, it's entertaining, but I mean, this obviously isn't for straight line speed. This is not a muscle car. This is definitely a sports car. So we need to talk a little bit about the handling. To start, Subaru claims that this has near perfect weight distribution, and I'm assuming by that they mean 50-50 weight distribution front to rear axle, probably something like 51% in the front, 49% in the rear, somewhere along those lines. Now, me personally, perfect weight distribution would be something like 40% in the front, 60% in the rear, something more like a mid-engine Corvette. Really, really good, that mid-engine Corvette, but I know what they mean, and yes, it's definitely good to have balanced weight front and rear axle. That's certainly better than a front heavy car. In terms of suspension geometry, you do have the fairly ubiquitous strut suspension up front, but you also do have double wishbone suspension geometry in the rear, and generally speaking, you have a really nicely tuned suspension. And I know that because, of course, I had to test how this handling was, and spoiler alert, it's good. Let me show you. All right, everybody, time for a handling test. I do have the car in sport mode, and I also have it in track mode, which turns off the traction control system and gives me the different digital instrument cluster as well. So anyway, let's see how it goes. Yep, it's quick shifting automatic, but it is an automatic. Oh, great balance. Oh man, did you see I had to open up the steering a little bit just from that corner? Wow, really good balance. Oh wow. Yeah, so we get some body roll, but it's all very well controlled, very balanced with the rest of the car. Good body control, it's just not super stiff. Nice and fast steering, good direct turn and response, good feel from the chassis. You feel low to the ground. It's easy to go quickly in this thing. Oh man, this is satisfying. Very, very satisfying. Okay, definitely worthy of turning around and doing that a bit more. Oh man, that is just great entertainment. That is a nice, satisfying drive experience. Good feel from the steering, good feel from the chassis, real easy to feel the limit. Everything works in conjunction with each other. There's a real nice balance across the chassis. Good feel from the brakes, good linear throttle response, naturally aspirated engine, and yes, this is an automatic, and it really shouldn't be, but it is a really well-tuned automatic. You do stay in the lower gears to keep the revs up. It is quick to downshift for you, and it is quick to lock up to torque converter to give you good direct shifts, and the shifts themselves are fast, but the chassis is just fantastic. Even though it's not mega fast in a straight line, it's mega satisfying in the corners. I mean, you can see so clearly what this car was built for. But yes, a car like this will definitely also have to spend some time on the interstate and just go around and do some more domestic driving. And, you know, the ride on this thing is perfectly fine. It's a little bit on the stiff side, but it's not uncomfortable in any ways. It's not jarring over bumps or anything like that. It's just a touch stiff. And for a proper sports car, that's really good. And that's true on roads like this or on the interstate. Let me show you that right now. All right, guys, time for a quick test on the interstate. The car is in normal driving mode. Traction control is back on, but I don't want to waste any time getting there. Okay, this is as close to just like a pure and simple sports car as we can get in this modern era, and yet it is still the modern era. And that means we do have adaptive cruise control and other safety systems on this car. So I'm setting that up right now. This does give you things like lane departure warning and those kinds of systems, in addition to the adaptive cruise control is what you're dealing with. The 2.4 liter flat 4, it's really nicely tuned in terms of like hearing the exhaust, hearing a lively, sporty exhaust. I really appreciate that, especially when you're out on nice roads driving. On the interstate, it is a touch on the loud side, a little bit droney, and we are turning just under 2,500 RPM, going an indicated 78 miles an hour, which is higher than average these days, especially for an automatic. This is a 6-speed automatic, not an 8, 9, or 10-speed automatic or CVT, but still, I mean, you do get better fuel economy in the automatic-equipped BRZ, but it's still only so-so. That said, this car is definitely more pleasant than the last generation car. The increased chassis stiffness and rigidity is definitely helping, and the engine definitely does sound better as well, but this is still a pretty noisy thing. There's a big tanker truck next to me, and that is very loud and obvious to hear, so a lot of road noise gets in. Wind noise is actually reasonably well isolated, and these Michelin Primacy tires are actually quite quiet. So road noise is low, wind noise is pretty low, but then just general noise coming through the windows, other cars, traffic, that kind of stuff, that comes through pretty prevalently, and the engine is on the loud side just for driving on the interstate. All in all, this was more or less what I expected. Not your first choice for a family road trip, but you know, certainly suitable if you're on your way to or do a weekend car trip. So what do we have in this second generation BRZ? Just bluntly speaking, Subaru knocked it out of the park. In this modern times where there's so much pressure to get bigger and more comfortable and have more driving assist systems and safety systems and all this kind of stuff, Subaru stayed true to what the BRZ is supposed to be: a small, lightweight, low to the ground, low center of gravity, simple sports car. It's relatively inexpensive and just sticks to all the fundamentals that driving enthusiasts look for. And just like the styling I said earlier, this was not a revolutionary car, it was just an evolution of the first generation car, where they took surgical precision to what was wrong with this car or what were weaknesses of the first generation car and how could they improve it. Keeping naturally aspirated for the engine, fantastic, and yet nice improvement in power and critically in torque and torque peaks. Big plus there. The handling, the balance, still so good. To feel the limit, super easy, and play around with it, great fun. Good steering feel, good front end. It's just everything about this car is fun. It's just a joy to drive. It's a joy to drive quickly and a reminder of why you fell in love with driving so much in the first place. I'm Robin Warner. Thank you for watching. And if you are still watching, I would really appreciate it if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. Those things really do help me out quite a lot. Okay, goodbye. Let's find some more curvy roads. Oh my gosh. Quicker than I expected.